Well, joining me to discuss this story is Alice Bayer from Survival International, a group which exists to fight for the rights of tribal peoples around the world. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to come in to explain all this to us. And I shall ask you to put it in some perspective. How did this situation arise in Botswana?
Well, the Kalahari Bushmen have been facing persecution from the government ever since diamonds were first discovered on their land in the Central Kalahari Game Reserve, and that was in the 1980s, so it goes way back. And the Bushmen have actually been forcibly removed from the Kalahari in 3 moves. That was about 15 years ago. At the time, the Bushmen sued the government, and in a landmark victory, as you mentioned, in 2006, they won the right to return to the land, to live on the land, and to be able to hunt on the land. However, the government continues to persecute the Bushmen. It just seems to be intent on driving them off the land by stopping them to hunt, to feed their families, by effectively starving them off.
Why do you think they're being persecuted?
Well, like I said, I mean, diamonds were discovered on the land, so that is a possible reason. The government actually justifies it by saying that in the name of conservation, the Bushmen need to leave the land. But it's a deep irony because the Bushmen have been living sustainably on this land for many generations, and there is no evidence that they threaten the wildlife.
The fact, of course, is that some people may argue that anti-poaching measures are needed to conserve endangered wildlife species in that area. But you say that the Bushmen are skilled at conservation. Can you tell us how this has sort of developed and evolved?
Sure. I mean, like I said, the Bushmen depend on the land and they depend on the wildlife for their survival. They have no interest in species going extinct, so their methods of hunting are very sustainable. They hunt with bows and arrows, with spears. They don't use guns, and they only hunt to feed their families.
Now, there's also an issue of access to water, isn't there? Sort of a problem for the Bushmen, despite there being sort of tourist swimming pools and resorts and all that nearby. I mean, why is this happening?
Yeah, so when the Bushmen were removed from their lands, the government also sealed their water boreholes, which they'd been using for many years, and has since refused to reopen these boreholes. The Bushmen have also won the right to sink new boreholes, but it's been very difficult to implement, to get new boreholes in place. So the Bushmen have been forced to fetch water from outside the reserve, which takes some days. And it's one of the driest places on Earth, as you can imagine. And if you can just picture tourists swimming in the pools while the Bushmen are going thirsty next door, it's just deep irony.
What I'm trying to understand, and the word irony I think works rather well here, as you pointed out, is the fact that the government seems to be looking for ways on a sort of continuous basis to try and limit their lifestyle, or to try and, if you like, end their lifestyle. Is it trying to integrate them into Botswana society? I mean, what is it actually? What is the ultimate aim? I don't understand. Because I mean, you talked about diamonds, but you know, they've obviously they're mining their diamonds. The government is doing it at the moment, and the Bushmen are existing alongside that taking place. I mean, why does it seem to be that the little space they occupy, that they're constantly being sort of chased after by the government?
Well, the diamond mine is actually just going to come into operation next week, so that's actually a very new development. But yeah, it does seem that the government will do anything in its power to get the Bushmen off the land, and I think there is also a deep prejudice and racism towards the Bushmen's way of life as hunter-gatherers. The government has in the past said that they are living a primitive Stone Age existence and that they should be developed and be. So
that's really what's behind it, isn't it? I mean, they want to drag them kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
Yeah, but the difficulty with that is, like with tribal peoples around the world, when they're removed from their lands, they don't. They just end up at the bottom rungs of society. I mean, some Bushmen today who were removed from the land are living in resettlement camps, and they've been called places of death. Their alcoholism, depression is high. There are no jobs. And there's nothing for the Bushmen to do there. So it's really it's crazy for the government to pursue this policy of driving the Bushmen off the land who just want to live in peace in the Central Kalahari Game Reserve.
But of course, the Bushmen are smart enough and adapted enough to use the court system. I mean, they're talking about suing the government. It's the latest in a long line of sort of legal battles. But if they are successful, what are the chances that this time the government will adhere to the terms set out by the court?
It's very difficult to know, but at least we know that if the Bushmen do win this case, if the case goes ahead, that it will be much more difficult for the government to prosecute Bushmen who have been found hunting, which is happening at the moment. They're being charged and brought to court when they're found hunting, so that will be much more difficult.
And of course, their lawyer is Gordon Bennett. He's got to get back into the country to defend them. Do you think the government will let him back in?
It's very unlikely that Mr. Bennett will be let back in. He has not received a visa to go in. Actually, in this case, the Bushmen are being represented by a local law firm, and it seems that the government will do anything it can to prevent Mr. Bennett from coming back because he has so far successfully won every case that he's taken on for the Bushmen, and the government obviously do not like that.
Now, this is right up the street where you operate, your sort of organisation, Survival International. What are they doing, what are you doing to help the Bushmen of Botswana?
Well, we've supported the Bushmen to live on their land ever since they were first told they needed to leave in the 80s. And most recently, we are supporting this legal initiative for them to have the right to hunt on their lands, because they are hunters, not poachers, which is how the government are treating them. And in the past, we've supported a tourism boycott. We've called on tourists to stay away from Botswana because of the issue that we brought up earlier of these tourism companies on the land of the Bushmen with swimming pools, while the Bushmen are not allowed to have access to water.
Yeah, but nobody's listening to you, are they? I mean, the tourists are still going there.
I would disagree. We've had several tourist companies support our boycotts, and in the end of the day, it's really about raising awareness, and it has hundreds of thousands of travelers have received the message that they should not go to Botswana.
Now, is this a common problem beyond Botswana? Are there other tribes, ethnic groups in Africa that are affected by the same sort of thing?
It's actually a problem around the world that we see that tribal peoples are being illegally evicted from their lands in the name of conservation. They're treated like poachers and driven off, while in actual fact they are the best conservationists. They have intimate knowledge of their environments and they know how to protect it, and it's in their interest to protect it as well.
So what's your final thoughts on this? How do you think all this is going to go? What would you like to see happen? What sort of pressure can you bring beyond what you've done to bear?
Well, we would like the international public to become aware of what's going on and to support the Bushmen's right to live on their lands the way that they want to live, their hunter-gatherer lifestyle. It's a unique way of life that should be allowed to continue in the 21st century, and also for tribal peoples around the world to be allowed to live in conservation areas without being treated like poachers or wilderers on their land.
Alice Bayer from Survival International, the group that's fighting for the rights of tribal peoples around the world. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.